Julia Pomares, who is Executive Director of CIPPEC in Argentina, who is here with us today and will be leading the keynote this morning or afternoon. So, Julia, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning from Argentina. We are keen to hear more about the future of politics.
Thank you, Enrique, and morning and good afternoon to everyone in the community, and happy birthday for all on think tankers. I'd like to tell you a bit about what we are thinking with some colleagues from around the world on the future of politics. So let me start by saying and telling you we are almost getting to day 100 of quarantine in Argentina, and I'm having a lot of insomnia, probably you too. And one night of this lockdown with insomnia, I woke up dreaming that a time machine appeared on the balcony of my house. I couldn't remember when I woke up where I was going to, or if it transported me to the future or the past. But I found myself in the morning imagining where I wish I traveled, probably because I love traveling from the last months. And although I think I love historical British movies with big dresses and castles, actually I imagine going to the future, not too far away, 2030. If I could travel a decade forward, there are two questions I would like the machine to help me answer. The first one is, was COVID-19 the first in a series of intermittent pandemics that we became used to? And two, which of the many traits that we are seeing that seem unique to this pandemic is going to survive after we discover the vaccine? I am a political scientist, so I cannot try to answer the first question. Maybe you there can help to answer that one. But I think I can tell you my hypothesis about the second question, about what is unique of this pandemic. And I think that this one trait that for me is very important, and is that this pandemic coincided with a historic moment of transformation of global capitalism. We were living in Detroit capitalism, as some want to call it, and we are now living in the Silicon Valley model, right? So I think this year, 2020, will probably mark the end of the transition to this intangible economy where we are living now of big data and artificial intelligence. And we know we've been in this process for some decades now, and we know a lot about the future of work. And I think we know too little about the future of politics. And let me first tell you why I think it will be accelerated by COVID-19. I think for two reasons. First, because it's forcing us to work remotely. And second, because it's increasing digital consumption from our homes. So if this transit to the intangible world economy is going to be accelerated, I think the big question now is what is going to be the impact on institutions? Because we know, as I was saying, we know a lot probably about automation, the future of work, which works are going to be replaced, which jobs are going to be transformed. But we are probably quite in the dark about how institutions will be transformed. Digital transformation is very exponential, and I think it can lead us to think and imagine that these exponential changes will also be exponential for institutions. But I think this is the very big question we are facing now. Are we going to follow the mantra of crisis as an opportunity, and our institutions are going to change dramatically? Or are we going to have a more modest mantra of not every crisis is a turning point? And I would love to hear what you think it's the impact in your countries. Which mantra is going to prevail? And I don't have a time machine, unfortunately, but I want to hypothesize with you about the impact of the pandemic for the future of politics. And because it's very difficult to make predictions, and I think that's not the best way to do it, I think my best guess is to think whether the trends that we were already seeing before the first infected will be accelerated, will be stopped, or there will be a change, of course, right? So this is the approach I'm going to take with you for the next minutes, and think what trends are going to change. And before I doing that, I would like to ask you to talk with a friend. It's a chatbot. We created it together with Socio Público. I think Enrique is going to put it in the link if you want to get a try. It's going to take you 3 minutes to go through chatting with him or her for some moments and to get your views about what the trends are. I think you have it there in the link. Yes, great. Thank you, Enrique. So I'll give you a few more minutes if you want to try it. It's part of the big project that we are doing together with colleagues in different think tanks around the world. Some of you are there, so thank you for being here with us. And well, this chatbot is supposed to have a way of talking about and thinking, making you think about what the future is going to look like in 2030 in your views. I cannot tell you now the answers because it's going to take us a lot, but I can share some results with you, Enrique, later on, and you can then take a look at them. And we are getting a lot of answers from people around the world. So in some months, we're going to get a big report on this. So as you can see, and if you went through the bot, there are some trends that we are trying to figure out how they are going to play out. So let me get into this. I'm going to focus on 4 trends. The first trend is about who rules the world, whether the West or the East. If in the 80s, Tears for Fears sang that everybody wants to rule the world, I'm not going to sing it. In the 2020s, they should sing, "Hey, China, now it's your turn," right? What do you think? I think that, and there are many signs that coronavirus is going to accelerate the deterioration in US leadership. There are some signs about that. Obviously, soft power remains strong, but it's true that it's the first crisis in decades that the United States seems to step down from its role as a global leader and does not use this crisis to project prestige, to project legitimacy. So is China appearing to seek to take that place? I think that is something that we need to follow very closely. It's not yet clear, but that would have an impact on multilateral governance. Before the pandemic, we were uncertain about how global governance would evolve, and some of those questions were with the chatbot. You could imagine a kind of continuum that goes from very close structures where local or national governments making decisions unilaterally to global institutions taking the lead. We were at some point for the last years trying to figure out which trend we were going to follow because there are some tensions there. And I think that the way we are seeing the reactions at the global level of how to deal with the pandemic is probably going to change this course. I think the pandemic showed something that seemed quite unthinkable months ago, that most governments, whether democratic, authoritarian, they all or most of them share a common value, putting human life above the immediate economic effect. But the interesting thing here is that this not resulted in greater coordination between national governments, or maybe, yes, at some national level, but we did see, and we are seeing coordination between the scientific community and among non-state entities at levels that we've never seen before. Look, for example, at the high level of cooperation between private corporations, quite a distinctive feature of this pandemic. For example, the joint action between Google and Apple to facilitate the tracing apps. More cooperation among corporate actors than cooperation in the G20, for instance. So I think that this pandemic is going to shape a lot of our global governance institution. The second trend that I want to tell you a bit about is about the size of firms. We were seeing over the last years the concentration of economic power in large tech companies and quite a lot of weight of small and medium-sized enterprises. And it seems to me, and here is my hypothesis, that just as the COVID-19 accelerates the digitalization, it's also going to accelerate this concentration in tech companies. So we might not know how much this pandemic will affect global governance so far, but we know already that governments are going to negotiate with very powerful global players in the market in the years to come. This was already happening. I know you're probably thinking that, but my point is here that it is going to be accelerated by COVID-19. And this is a wake-up call for governments with low ability to negotiate rules of play with big players and trying to figure out how to increase their power vis-a-vis these big players. The third trend is about inequalities and whether these social inequalities that we were seeing are going to increase. And here my take is that yes, definitely. We are seeing not only that these inequalities are going to increase among countries, but also within countries. And this is something that we were already seeing before, and I think the coronavirus is going to accelerate, especially if the economic depression that is predicted is not quite reversed. This acceleration of inequality, we're going to see it and be evident in COVID-19 maps. Consider, for example, the gaps in access to digital education, the gaps to access to telework. There's some good news here for leaders. National and local governments have great capacity to influence and shape this trend through skills training, to investment policies in technological infrastructure. But local leaders will be probably at a crossroads. In several countries, they're assuming greater responsibilities, and this is happening, for example, in many places in Latin America, and they're having more responsibility but fewer resources. So they will have to be very clever in the way they invest in the years to come to get these inequalities be mitigated. And the fourth trend and final trend is probably a natural corollary of the previous ones. And in recent years, we've seen a deterioration of the liberal component of democracies, a resurgence of nationalism in many parts of the world. This quite toxic combo of distrust in politics, low voter turnout, and polarization had been quite an unattended time bomb. And the big question here is what will happen after COVID-19? It's too early to tell, I know. But let me tell you what I think so far. In the short term, it seems to me that the ostrich club, as some call the populists because of their behavior to hide the problem, probably some of them will lose ground because of their poor performance. And in the medium term, it seems to me that the effect will be the other way around. This pandemic is going to reinforce what led to the emergence of populist and nationalistic leaders, inequality, low levels of social cohesion. So it might be the case, and that is something that we should be looking at, that this pandemic would accentuate polarization and greater decision-making in leadership. And let me finish here by saying that against this background, the role of AI is very important. And I think we should not be focusing on how to improve the provision of services. We know that that is going to happen because of AI. But what is the role of AI to promote accountability and transparency? I know that this is something that you've been talking about these days. Just as in chess, we lamented for some years because the Deep Blue machine beat Kasparov. I think we managed to build this centaur chess, half human, half artificial. I think here the great challenge we are facing is how to build a hybrid democracy. That means an augmented democracy and not less democracy, not a deteriorated democracy. And I think that is our big challenge for all of us. I don't have my DeLorean here. They announced that they're going to produce it again in 2021. So if I have the possibility to travel to the future next year, I will tell you how my ideas and these hypotheses evolve, but I will be very happy to share them and talk with you about this in the next minute. So thank you so much, and thank you, Enrique, for the possibility for sharing with all of you our work on the future of politics.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia. I just want to so thank you for that talk. I appreciate it, and I think you wrote about this in the Argentinian media as well. So I'll try to share the article with the participants. I have an obvious question for us, which is if these are your dreams or nightmares about the future of politics in 2030. How does CIPPEC look like in 2030, or how do think tanks like CIPPEC look like in 2030? What are the possible scenarios for think tanks that are, in essence, political organizations? You know, they participate in that politics that you are describing. You know, how do you think they'll change most of all?
That's a tough one. I think that talking about what I was saying about the centaur chess and the possibility of these hybrid combinations, I think probably think tankers will be also hybrid people, and we will be needing to have a combination of AI applications in our work and trying to have more multidisciplinary teams. And we have now, well, we at CIPPEC try always to have multidisciplinary teams, but it's true that we need a lot to do to have more tech people in our projects and trying to have a good combination of new tools. And so that one is a first thing that probably will be different from now. The second one is that we are more and more working with people from around the world. Well, you on think tanks do a great job about that in trying to connect us all. And I think that this connection is going to be easier and easier. So how we try to have projects that try to influence in our countries, but also have the ability to influence on other countries as well at the same time. So how to coordinate our work and have strong advocacy tools because of our coordination at the global level. And at that point, I think that the work of think tanks and other organizations like yours that try to help build networks, they're going to be even more powerful than they are now.
But is it going to be harder to build those networks, given that future that you suggest?
I think it's going to be easier to build the networks because we're going to be facing more and more global problems, climate change, regulation of AI. There are several, many of the problems that our countries face are also global problems and they need global public goods. So we will need to coordinate to get those responses. Otherwise, we're going to get country-level responses, but are quite ineffective. So I think that we will be faced with the need to build these coordination strategies.
So let me go back. Let me go to a couple of comments from the from participants, which I think are related in some way. I mean, one, I think you can probably relate to from an Argentinian point of view. Populism is not new. You know, you've lived it in Argentinian history. So have we in Latin America in general. But there is this feeling that is, I think there is this narrative that seems to be new, and all of a sudden it has just arrived in the global stage, and we should be very careful about it. But we've lived through it before. So what is it about? Is there anything about this new type of populism or new type of populism that we should be more concerned about, or is this just another virus? Is this the same virus we've felt through for many years before, and we just have to deal with it? Yeah, that's kind of the first comment.
Yeah, great. I try to differentiate in my talk between these two moments of the impact. In the short term, we're seeing that populist leaders are in many countries like Mexico or other countries. They are performing very badly in how they manage the pandemic. So we are seeing a kind of resurgence of evidence, the need for evidence-based policy again in several countries, that we are all the time trying to see what scientists say on the media. We're seeing a lot of the people from the scientific community and the media, that was quite unusual the last years. So I think in the short term, populist leaders will face bad moments. But in the medium term, I see kind of the same type of populist leaders that could come back again. And I think that's why I was saying that either we go for a crisis as an opportunity moment and we try to make transformations to our institutions, or we think that this is more of the same. And I think that this is a moment for ambition in very big transformations to our institutions. And I think it's part of our work as think tankers to imagine and devise those institutions. For example, several countries are getting with remote Congress working and parliaments are working remotely. So is this just an emergency measure to have the Congress is working at the moment, or are we going to take this opportunity and say, okay, so many of the tools that some parliaments are using now to work remotely could actually be used in the future, and try to use those tools to get a better engagement with a citizenship. So I think that we have a responsibility to try to use and shape this moment for transforming our institutions.
Thanks. And then one final question before we
Yes.
we move to the coffee room. Jessica Musilia sort of comments, and I think this is true for most countries. In developing countries, it has refocused government to look at the needs of the people at the bottom of the pyramid, and I think in some respects it is linked to the populist rhetoric that at least we experience in some countries. Right? It's very obvious. The inequalities are very obvious right now. Right? The differences between the haves and the have-nots have become extremely obvious for people to a degree that is just harrowing, and so it makes it not just necessary, but it makes it very easy for governments to turn their policies, turn their discourse towards helping those at the bottom of that pyramid, which are in developing countries the majority. But how capable are they to actually address the real needs of the people at the bottom of the pyramid? And how capable are think tanks to really understand those real needs and help address them?
Yes, definitely. I think I highlighted at the end of my talk about the need to think of AI as a tool for transparency and accountability more than for the provision of services. But having said that, I think that it's a very important moment to think at state capacities, right? A concept that was quite absent from our discussion for the last 20 years. And get back to the 90s. Also, what state capacities we have, for example, in Latin America with the sanitary infrastructure and all the way that our health systems are working. So I think that you can have now a immediate reaction to help those who are in the bottom with transferring money and several strategies that we need now for this short-term moment of emergency. But in the medium term, we are not going to get those problems of inequality solved if we don't work on our state capacities. And I think it's a topic that is probably usually out of our conversations in think tanks. It's not a sexy and a hot topic, but I think it's something that we should be focused on. And I think we need to take that responsibility on our shoulders.
Great. From moving from the politics to the policies.
Yes.
That are definitely required. So thank you very much, Julia. That was fantastic.